Take your hand off her.
She was in your bedroom at 11 o'clock last night, Caleb.
Because I asked her to be.
Caleb, she told me so herself. Every night.
Every night since her second week. She brings the tea up and I open the door.
You open the door.
Say what you're actually saying, Sloane.
I'm saying your mother's staff shouldn't know what your bedroom looks like at night.
Say the rest of it.
I don't have to. Everybody in this room already knows what she is.
What is she, Sloane?
She's the maid. Her father's been dead a month, and she's already found the one door in this house that opens.
She has a name, Sloane. If you can't manage that, say my mother's staff.
Mother, are you going to say something?
Corinne Ostrander did not say anything at all. There were 5 people in that living room. Sloane's hand was already back at her side. Thea Barlow's face was turned toward the window, and she had not made a noise. Isaac Mott was halfway through the door with his phone still in his hand, and in the far door, where the hall ran back toward the kitchen, a man stood in a dark olive jacket. He was holding a flashlight. He had no reason to be holding it. Nobody looked at him. Nobody in that house had looked at him in 6 years. 4 of those 5 people would swear to what happened in that room. Every one of them told it a little differently. Every one of them left out the same thing. 3 months later, the man in the olive jacket walked up to a gate across the city. He had a recording on his phone. It was not the gate anybody was watching. You already want to know who was standing in that doorway. Subscribe so the answer finds you. Back to the week she took the job. The Ostranders paid 9 people to keep that house running. They knew the name of one of them. 3 weeks before that, Thea Barlow sat in a lecture hall with a pen in her hand. Her phone buzzed twice on the desk. She turned it over. The number was one she did not know. She almost let it go. Is this Thea? Is this Ray Barlow's daughter? She said yes. She stayed in that lecture hall a long time after the call ended. The room emptied around her. A girl she had never spoken to touched her shoulder on the way out. Then she thought better of it and left. Her father had spent 19 years on job sites. He got up at 4. He called her bird every morning of her life. He had never once asked her what her tuition cost. They buried him on a Tuesday. On Thursday, her mother sat down at the little round table in the apartment. She folded her hands. She could not look at her. Mom, I've known since February. Known what? Colleen Barlow turned her cup around on the table. Both kidneys. It isn't going to turn around, honey. 3 mornings a week from now on. Thea did not cry at that table. She got up and filled the kettle because her hands needed something. She stood with her back to the room until the water ran. She was 24 years old. She was in her 3rd year of nursing school on a full scholarship. She was good at it. 2 of her instructors had already told her where they thought she would end up. That night, she took her student card out of her wallet. She looked at it for a while. Then she put it in the drawer under the cutlery tray and shut the drawer. I'm not going back this year, Mom. Thea, it's 1 year. Her mother put her hand flat on the table. That is what everybody says. Then it'll be 1 year, and I'll be a liar. She looked for work for 3 days. Nothing paid what the hospital wanted, and let her keep the apartment, too. Nothing came close. On the 4th morning, she walked into a domestic agency on 9th Street. She read the board by the door. Live-in housekeeper. Private residence. Aldon Ridge. The number on that card was more than double anything else on the board. She stood there a long time. The woman at the desk came around to see what she was looking at. That one's been up 11 days. Why? Because it's Aldon Ridge, sweetheart. The gates on Aldon Ridge were iron and taller than a man. There was a small lit booth beside them with a folding chair in it. Thea gave her name at the window. A man in a dark olive jacket wrote it on a clipboard. He looked at her a second longer than he needed to. Then he opened the gate. The drive went up and around. The house came out from behind the trees all at once. She had never been inside a house like that. She did not slow down. Corinne Ostrander interviewed her in the living room, standing. It took under 4 minutes. You're young for this. Yes, ma'am. You've done housework? Thea kept her hands still at her sides. I've cleaned my own since I was 16, and other people's since then. I cook. My mother taught me. And you're at the university. I was, ma'am. I left last month. She had not been asked that. She said it anyway. A thing that comes out later always comes out worse. My father died 3 weeks ago. My mother's on dialysis 3 mornings a week. I need the money, and I need to live in. Our apartment is close to the hospital, and I'd rather she keep it. Corinne Ostrander looked at her for a moment. Thea would think about that moment a great deal later on. The woman had not hired her in spite of the honesty. She hired her because of it. She filed it away, and she used it exactly 9 weeks after. You'll start today. There are 2 things. Yes, ma'am. My son takes chamomile at 11 every night without me having to say it again. Yes, ma'am. And nothing in this house gets taken. Not food, not soap, not a pen. If you want something in it, you ask me. Say it back. If I want something, I ask you, ma'am. There were 9 on the staff. She met 6 of them that first day. None of them asked her anything except where she was from. Her room was at the back, on the ground floor. A bed, a chest of drawers, a wooden chair beside the door, a window onto the hedge. She put her bag on the chair and stood there. She let herself feel it for about 10 seconds. Then she went and found the linen cupboard. In the front room, high between 2 windows, there was a framed photograph. It was a ribbon cutting, 17 years old. Corinne Ostrander was in the middle of it, young, holding the shears. A heavy-set man in black horn-rimmed glasses stood at her shoulder. His hand was flat on her back. Thea dusted that frame on her second morning. She put it back straight. She did not look at it twice. The kitchen at 11 at night was the best room in that house. It was the only one that looked like anybody lived in it. Thea set the kettle. She took a plain white cup down from the second shelf and put it on the tray. Then she took down a second one. She had been there 11 days when she started doing that. Nobody ever asked her about it. She never explained it because there was nothing to explain. She carried the tray up and left one cup at the top of the stairs. Then she carried the other one down the drive in the dark. The little booth by the gates was the only lit thing out there. The first night, the man inside stood up too fast. He knocked the clipboard off the ledge. That's not for me. It is, though. They don't do that here. Thea held it out anyway. I know. I'm new. Nobody's told me the rules yet. He took it. He held it in both hands, the way a man holds something that might be a trick. What's your name? He had to think about it. That was the part she remembered afterwards. A man had to stop and consider before giving his own name. He had come to that gate every night for 6 years. Milo Kester. Thea Barlow. How do you take it, Mr. Kester? Take what? Tea. I brought chamomile because that's what I was making. I don't imagine that's what you drink. He laughed once, through his nose. Strong, 2 sugars. Then I'll bring that. And she did. Every night after, 1 cup went up to the landing. 1 went down to the gate, strong, 2 sugars. The second cup sat on that window ledge until it went cold. Neither of them ever said a word about it to anybody. There was a clipboard hanging on a nail in that booth. There was a phone in Milo Kester's chest pocket. On the 4th or 5th night, she asked him what the clipboard was for. Every car, every van, every person. Time in, time out. I write it all down. Does anybody read it? Nobody's ever read 1 page of it. Thea leaned on the ledge. Then why? He turned the cup around where it stood. 9 years ago, I worked a warehouse. Stock went missing off my shift. It wasn't me, and that didn't matter 1 bit. I was the man on the door, so I was the man who did it. What happened? Nothing happened. That's the thing about it. Nobody ever charged me. They all just decided, and I couldn't get hired anywhere for 2 years. He tapped his chest pocket. So now I write everything down. And when somebody comes to that gate and talks to me, I record it too. Every time. I don't ask permission, and I don't tell them. That's allowed. In this state it is. I checked before I started. On the 15th night, The door at the top of the stairs opened while she was still bending down. "You can knock, you know." "I didn't want to wake you, sir." Caleb Ostrander picked the cup up off the carpet himself. "I've been awake since 4 this morning. Waking me isn't the risk." He was in a white shirt with the sleeves turned back twice. There were papers on the desk behind him. The desk lamp was the only light on in the room. "You're the new one." "Yes, sir." "What's your name?" "It doesn't matter, sir." Something in his face moved at that. "It matters to the person who has it," she told him. He said it back and got it wrong. He put the weight on the front of it, the way most people did. "Faya. Faya. All right. I'll have it right tomorrow." He looked past her at the landing, then at the corridor, then back into his own room. "Did you do the shelves?" "Yes, sir." "Yesterday." "Nobody's ever done those. Not since I moved back into this house." "They're done now, sir." He stood in the doorway with the cup in his hand and did not say anything. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes, sir." "Why do you say sir every time?" "Because I work here." Thea shifted the tray onto her hip. "Everybody in this house works here, except me and my mother. Not one of them says it." "Then I'll stop if you'd rather." "No. Keep it if you want it." "I only wanted to know it was a choice." That was the whole of it. That was the entire conversation. It lasted under 2 minutes. There was nothing in it that anybody could have called improper. 9 weeks later, 5 people stood in a living room and tried to make it into something else. She went back down. She got the second cup. She carried it out into the cold and down the drive. Milo Kester slid the window open before she got there, because he had started watching for her. "Strong, 2 sugars. You're going to spoil me and then leave." "Everybody leaves eventually, Mr. Kester." Milo. Up in the house, the light in the corner room stayed on until 2. Caleb Ostrander was building something that had nothing to do with his mother's company. 4 people in the world knew about it. The woman who brought him tea was not one of them. Sloane Ferris came to that house. The way people come to a place they already own. She had been engaged to Caleb Ostrander for 5 months. Thea worked 2 things out without anybody telling her. The pair of them were never in a room alone, and Sloane spent most of her visits sitting with Corinne. The 7th week was a Thursday. Thea came down the upstairs hall at 7:10 with an armful of shirts. Sloane was on the landing. "Whose are those?" "They're going to the laundry, ma'am." "That's not what I asked you." "They're Mr. Ostrander's." Sloane did not move out of the way. "And what were you doing in his room?" "Collecting the laundry, ma'am." Sloane went down the stairs first. That was deliberate. She wanted the room at the bottom of them. Corinne was already in the living room. Isaac Mott had come by with a folder and was standing near the door. Milo Kester had come up from the gate with the logbook, the way he did at the start of every shift. He stopped in the hall doorway because the room had gone quiet. "Tell her what you told me." "I said I was collecting the laundry." She was in his bedroom with the door shut. Thea looked at Corinne and then back down at the carpet. "I'm there at 11 every night as well, ma'am. I take him his tea." She should not have said the second part. She knew it as it left her mouth. It was not defiance. It did not even sound like defiance. It was simply true, and it was the wrong shape of true. The sound came before anybody moved. Afterwards, Thea's face was turned toward the window. Her arms were still full of shirts. She had not dropped one of them. Sloane's hand was already back at her side. Corinne Ostrander had not stepped forward. Isaac had gone very still in the doorway. And in the hall, the man in the olive jacket stood there with a flashlight and a logbook and did not exist. Caleb came in through the front door with his coat still on. "Take your hand off her." "She was in your bedroom at 11 o'clock last night, Caleb." "Because I asked her to be." Sloane's chin came up. "Caleb, she told me so herself." Every night since her 2nd week. She brings the tea up and I open the door. You open the door. Say what you're actually saying, Sloane." Thea did not move at all. "I'm saying your mother's. Staff shouldn't know what your bedroom looks like at night." "Say the rest of it." "I don't have to. Everybody in this room already knows what she is." "What is she, Sloane?" Sloane looked around the room first. She was counting who was in it. "She's the maid. Her father's been dead a month. And she's already found the one door in this house that opens. Caleb's voice came down about half a step. She has a name, Sloane. If you can't manage that, say, my mother's staff. She did not say it again. Mother, are you going to say something? Corinne Ostrander said nothing at all. He had used the word staff. Thea heard it. It went in somewhere and stayed there. It would be 9 weeks and 1 ruined night before she gave it back to him. He found her in the kitchen 20 minutes later. I'm sorry. You didn't do it, sir. It happened in my house. I'm sorry. Thank you, sir. Caleb. No, sir. Not tonight. Sloane Ferris left that house at 9 and did not go home. She drove 20 minutes across the city. There was a house there with a long white portico, and she let herself in without knocking. Daddy, sit down. He picked her in front of people. He picked the girl who does the washing. Dale Ferris did not look up from the papers on his knee. Sit down, Sloane. He never raised his voice at anything. It was the first thing people noticed about him. It was the last thing they understood about him. Is it done or is it not done? It's not done. He won't even set a date. Then his mother hasn't done her job. At 11 o'clock, the phone rang in Corinne Ostrander's study. She was sitting behind the desk with the lamp off, which she never did. She picked it up on the second ring, which she also never did. Corinne. Dale. She reached over and turned the desk lamp on, and then off again. I've been very patient with you. I know that. 17 years is patient. Your boy has had 5 months to put a date on a piece of paper. Corinne closed her eyes in the dark. He's 31. I can't march him anywhere. You marched him into the engagement. Her hand went flat on the edge of the desk. Give me more time. You've had the time. Now you'll get me a result. There was a pause on that line. It went on long enough for a person to count to 4. I built you. I put my name on your first 2 approvals. There was nothing behind you then, but a rented office and a bank that wouldn't take your call. Dale. I can unbuild you inside a month, and it will look like weather. Handle your son. She sat in that dark study for a long time after he hung up. Then she opened the second drawer on the left. She took out a folder that had been in there for 17 years. She did not open it. She put it back and closed the drawer. Down at the end of the drive, the kitchen door opened. A young woman in a navy dress and a white apron came out with a cup in each hand. Nobody in that house knew who Corinne Ostrander was actually working for. Nobody knew that the woman who owned it had not owned any of it since she was 41. Not in any way a court would recognize. Everything that happened after this turned on that. Upstairs, Caleb Ostrander sat with a cup of chamomile going cold at his elbow. He drew a line under a column of numbers. He told himself that in 3 months he would be out of that house, and none of it would matter. He was right about the 3 months. After that night, the house changed shape around her. It was not loud. Corinne Ostrander had never been wowed in her life. On the Monday she came into the front room. She ran 2 fingers along the top of a door frame and looked at them. Do this room again. I did it this morning, ma'am. Do it again. Thea did it again. She did the whole room, on her knees at the skirting boards. 2 of the other staff walked past the door and looked at the carpet. On the Wednesday, the same thing happened in the dining room. On the Friday, it happened twice. Then her mother had a bad night. Colleen Barlow called at 5:30 in the morning, which she had never done. She said it was nothing. She said she only wanted to hear a voice. Thea got off the phone and went to her bag. The strip of tablets in it was empty. There was a cupboard in the back hall with a first aid box in it. There were 4 boxes of the same tablets inside. She found Corinne in the kitchen at 7. The cook was there. One of the gardeners had come in from the yard. Ma'am, could I take 2 tablets from the box in the back hall, please? My mother's in pain, and I've run out. It's 2 tablets. Yes, ma'am. You said if I wanted something, I should ask you. Corinne set down her cup. Then ask me properly. The kitchen was not a big room. The cook had stopped what she was doing. The gardener had found something on his boot to look at. May I please have 2 tablets from the first aid box for my mother? Take 4? 2 is enough, ma'am. Take 4, and thank me for them. Thank you, ma'am. She went out through the back door. She stood in the yard for about a minute. Then she came back in and finished the breakfast things. Wendell Roy drove her to her mother every Thursday afternoon. It was not in anybody's arrangement. He simply started doing it in the second week. He waited outside for 2 hours each time, with the paper folded on the wheel. He called her Thea from the first day and never called her anything else. "You're quiet today." "I'm all right, Wendell." Wendell put the paper down on the seat. That is what people say in this car about twice a week. It has never once been true. On the Thursday of the 9th week, she came out of the apartment building and got in. She sat there with an envelope in her lap. "That the hospital? It's paid. All of it. 3 months forward as well." "Well now." "I didn't ask him for it, Wendell." "No, I don't imagine you did." She had gone to Caleb the day before to tell him she could not take it. He listened to the whole speech. Then he said one sentence and went back to his papers. It isn't a discussion. Now, before we go on, if you're still with me, do me one small thing. Tell me in the comments what you're doing while you listen. Somebody's always folding laundry. It's usually laundry. All right, back to that photograph on the wall. The ribbon cutting in the front room was taken in the spring, 17 years earlier. It was shot outside a half-finished building on the east side of the city. Corinne Ostrander is 31 days from her 41st birthday in that photograph. She is holding the shears. Her son is 14, standing off to the left where the frame cuts him in half. The heavy-set man behind her shoulder sat on the city planning committee. His hand is flat on her back. She had 2 approvals stuck that spring. She had a bank that had stopped returning her calls. She had 11 people on a payroll she could not meet in June. He came to her office himself. He sat down without being asked. He was very pleasant about all of it. He did not want money. That was the part she could never explain to anybody afterwards. He never wanted money. He wanted 41%. It would be held in a name that was not his, in an instrument that did not have to be filed anywhere. It could not be bought back except by agreement. She signed it on a Tuesday afternoon. There were 2 of his people in that room and nobody at all of hers. Every approval after that came through in 9 days. By the 4th year, she had a tower with her name across the top of it. She had 140 on the payroll. She had a photograph on her wall of the morning it started. By the 9th year, she had stopped thinking about the folder in the second drawer. By the 14th, she had almost convinced herself the arrangement had lapsed. He never called. There had never been a reason to call. He called in the first week that his daughter turned 26. That was the whole of it. There was no crime in that folder that anybody had ever been able to name out loud. There was a signature. There was her signature on a document she had read and understood. Every single thing that had happened to her since was built on top of it. The house on Aldon Ridge was not hers. The company with her name on it was not hers. She had spent 17 years being very careful, not to find out how much of it was not hers. And there was a girl in her kitchen at 11 at night making 2 cups of tea. Her son had come down a staircase and used the word staff about that girl. He had not used a tone like that since he was a boy. Corinne sat in the dark and worked it out the way she worked everything out. She worked it backwards from the result. She did not hate the girl. That would have been much easier to live with afterwards. On the Tuesday of the 9th week, Corinne Ostrander did 3 things. She told her son there was a dinner on Thursday he could not get out of. She sent the cook home at 8. At 9:30, she went into the small back room on the ground floor. The house was empty. She stood over a water bottle on the chest of drawers. Her hands shook so badly that she had to set it down twice. She had bought the tablets 4 days earlier in a town, 40 miles out, with cash. At 10, she walked down the drive in her coat. Milo Kester came out of the booth when he saw her. In 6 years, the woman had never once come to that gate on foot. "Ma'am, I want you to do something. You'll do it without asking me a single question." "All right." Corinne looked back up the drive at the house. "At 2 o'clock, you'll come up. The back door will be open. The girls' room is the first on the left past the laundry. You'll go into it, and you will be in it when I bring my son down." Milo did not answer her. "Say it back to me." I go in her room at 2. You bring him down. Yes. He looked past her, up the dark drive. And what am I supposed to be doing in there? Nothing at all. You don't have to do one thing. You only have to be in it. She put an envelope on the ledge of the window. There was a cold cup of tea beside it that she did not look at. There's $4,000 there. There's the same again on Friday. Milo did not touch the envelope yet. And if you say one word about this to anybody, you are the man on the door. There is 9 years of your history that says what people decide about the man on the door. Yes, ma'am. He picked it up. He watched her walk back up the drive. Then he sat down on the folding chair in that booth. He took his phone out of his chest pocket and stopped the recording. It had been running since she stepped up to the window. He sat there for 2 hours and did not drink the tea. At 2 o'clock, Milo Kester walked up to the house. He went in through the back door and down the passage past the laundry. Thea Barlow was asleep on top of the blanket, with her shoes still on. She had sat down at 11 to take them off and had not got that far. He did not go near her. There was a wooden chair beside the door. He picked it up and carried it 2 feet further from the bed. The legs scraped along the floor. He winced at the sound. Then he sat down on it with his back against the wall. He put his hands on his knees. His phone lay recording on the seat beside him. He stayed like that for 11 minutes. Then the light came on in the passage, and the door opened. Corinne Ostrander stood in it, with her hand still on the switch. Behind her, in a shirt he had pulled on wrong, was her son. Nobody said anything at all. Caleb Ostrander looked into that room for about 4 seconds. Then he turned around and walked back up the hall. He did not say one word. It was not the tablets. It was not the envelope or the man on the chair. It was that silence, and it was the one thing Thea Barlow could not carry. She was put out of the house at 8 the next morning, with her bag and her coat. She did not explain herself. There was nothing there to explain it to. She had woken at 6:30 with her mouth dry, and 11 minutes of her own life missing. By the time she understood what she was being accused of, the woman accusing her had already used the word we. We can't have it. You understand. Yes, ma'am. Wenda will take you down to the gate. I'll walk, ma'am. Milo Kester was at those gates at 6 the next morning. That was an hour before his shift ever started. He was waiting for a gray car to come down the drive. It came down at 10 to 7 and went past him at speed. Caleb Ostrander did not look at the booth. In 6 years, there had never been a reason to look at the booth. At 7:30, Corinne Ostrander's assistant called him. He was not to come in that night, or any night. His final pay would be posted. That was the first time. 3 weeks later, he waited 2 hours in the ground floor lobby of the Ostrander building. He had a phone in his pocket and a printed page in his hand. He got as far as the low glass gates. The woman on the desk was perfectly polite about it. Do you have an appointment with Mr. Ostrander? No. I have something he needs to hear. Then you'll want to email his office. He emailed the office. He did it twice. That was the second time. There is a particular kind of person a building is built to stop. Milo Kester had been one for most of his life. He understood exactly what was happening to him. He kept the recording anyway. Thea went home. She told her mother on the second night, sitting on the floor with her back against the sofa. It came out flat and in order, the way she gave a handover on the war. Thea, I'm all right. Look at me. Colleen took her daughter's chin in her hand. I'm all right, Mom. You are not, and you don't have to be. I am the one person in this world you don't have to be all right in front of. She cried then, about 4 minutes worth, with her mother's hand on the back of her head. Then she got up, washed her face, and made the dinner. She did not cry about it again for a very long time. She got 2 weeks in a laundry and 6 weeks on a night desk. The agency on 9th Street did not put her back on the board for a month. Nobody said why. Thea did not ask, because a person who asks is a person who is arguing. Caleb Ostrander did not sleep properly for 11 weeks. He gave his mother his resignation on a Tuesday and moved out on the Friday. The house on Harrow Lane was low and glass-fronted, with a lawn and no furniture in it. He took Isaac Mott with him and 4 clients, and nothing else. You want to talk about it? No. Caleb. Isaac pushed the folder across the table anyway. I saw what I saw. You've said that 11 times. Every single time you say it like a man reading it off a card. He put his pen down. There was a chair. What? The chair by the door. It was in the wrong place. Isaac waited. It's a small room, Isaac. It's a bed and a chest and a chair by the door. That chair was 2 feet out from the wall and turned around. He was sitting on it with his shoes on and his hands on his knees. So what does that mean? I don't know what it means. I've thought about it every night for 11 weeks. In the 3rd month, Isaac put an advertisement out through an agency on 9th Street. They needed a daily housekeeper. Neither of them could cook, and the boxes were still against the wall. He interviewed 4 people. He hired the second one. He did not think to tell Caleb her name. Caleb did not think to ask. She came in at 7 and left at 5. She never once saw the man who paid her. The house on Harrow Lane was half empty and full of light. She liked it better than the other one. She cleaned it the way she cleaned everything, which was completely. On the 9th morning, Caleb Ostrander came down the stairs at 7:20. A meeting had been moved. She was at the bottom of them with a folded cloth in her hand. Neither of them moved. I didn't know. Fia, I didn't know it was your house. I'll go. I'll call the agency this morning. Caleb put his hand on the rail. Don't. I'm your mother's staff, Mr. Ostrander. I'll go. That landed exactly where she had aimed it. It was 11 weeks and 1 whole life late. She watched it go in, and she was not sorry. The intercom went at 8:10. Isaac looked at the little screen by the door and turned around. There's a man at the gate. He's asking for you by name, and he won't give his. What does he look like? Big. 50s maybe. Olive jacket. Caleb Ostrander stood in the middle of his own empty front room for about 3 seconds. Let him in. Milo Kester had got the address from Wendell Roy. Wendell had driven a young woman to a dialysis unit every Thursday for 2 months, and he had been quietly furious ever since. He was the only person left on Aldon Ridge who knew where the night man lived. Milo came in and stood on the pale wood floor with his cap off. He would not sit down. I've been trying to get to you since the morning after. I know that now. No, sir, you don't. I was at the gate at 6 that morning, and you drove past me. He turned the cap around in his hands. I was in your lobby 3 weeks after that. 2 hours. I sent 2 emails. I never saw them. No, that is not the same as me not sending them. He put the phone down on the table. The room went very quiet. The recording was 11 minutes long. They listened to all of it. They heard a woman's voice on a cold night by a gate. They heard the whole instruction. They heard the sum of money and the sentence about the man on the door and what people decide about him. And then, at the end of it, they heard a chair being dragged 2 feet across a wooden floor. Milo reached over and put his finger flat on the table. That's me moving it. She was asleep on the bed with her shoes on. I put that chair as far from her as the room would let me. He straightened up. I sat on it. I never went near her, and I never touched one thing in that room. Thea had come in from the kitchen doorway. She had stopped there. Why didn't you do it? Milo Kester turned and looked at the young woman, standing in the door with a cloth in her hand. 6 years I stood at that gate. Every night. Nobody in that house ever asked me my name. Not one of them ever asked how I take my tea. She did, in her 2nd week. He put his cap back on. That's it. That's the whole reason. It isn't a good story. Corinne Ostrander came to Harrow Lane at 2 that afternoon. Her son had called her, said 4 words, and hung up. She did not deny any of it. She sat on the one sofa in that house, with her back straight, and her hands in her lap. She told the tablets. She told the town 40 miles out, and the cash. Then she told the rest of it, the part nobody in her family had ever heard. The spring of the ribbon cutting, the 41%, the folder in the 2nd drawer, and 17 years of being very careful not to look at it. I want you to understand that I was not saving myself. Mother, I was saving this. All of it. Your name is on it. Caleb did not sit down. You put a man in a girl's bedroom. Yes, I did that. Thea Barlow had said nothing for a long time. Mrs. Ostrander. Yes. I'm not going to do anything to you, ma'am. I know. Thea folded the cloth over her arm. That isn't kindness, and I want to be clear about it. If I did something to you, it would be about me. I've had 11 weeks of everything being about what people decided about me. Then what do you want? Say it again. Say it in front of the people who were standing in that hallway. She did it on a Thursday, in the front room on Aldon Ridge. 9 members of staff stood along the wall. Isaac Mott was by the door. The photograph from the ribbon cutting was still hanging between the windows. It took her 4 minutes, and she did not sit down. Wendell Roy took his cap off in the middle of it. The cook cried. 2 of them would not look at Thea afterwards, out of shame. One of them found her at the gate and could not get a whole sentence out. The folder came out of the second drawer 8 days later. Corinne Ostrander did not take it to a newspaper. She did not take it to her son's warriors. She took it to the people whose job it was. Then she answered every question they asked her for 4 months, including the ones that were about her. What they found in it was not really about a girl in a back bedroom at all. 17 years of approvals move a great deal of money. Money that moves in a pattern leaves the pattern behind it. Dale Ferris had held a position in 11 companies in a name that was not his. Every one of those 11 had come out the far side of a committee he sat on. None of that had ever been in one place before. Not one of those 11 people had ever been willing to put their own signature on the table first. It took 19 months. It was not dramatic. There was no moment. Sloane Ferris found out the way she found out everything, which was by ringing people. In the first week, she made 40 calls. By the second month, she had stopped. She had learned the thing her father spent his whole life, making sure she would never need to learn. A phone that does not ring is not a punishment anybody has to administer. Thea Barlow was not in any of those rooms. She had asked for one thing, and she got it. After that, it stopped being hers. I keep thinking that recording saved you. No. Thea. She put the tray down on the table. 2 cups of tea saved me. The recording just played it back. A year on, there is a house on Harrow Lane with furniture in it. Milo Kester runs the place. The gate, the grounds, the boiler that has never worked properly. He has an office with a window in it. He still fills in a clipboard every day. Nobody has ever read 1 page of it, and he does not mind. Colleen Barlow comes on Sundays. There is a mustard-colored shawl over the back of 1 chair at that table. Nobody moves it because it lives there now. And in a drawer in an apartment across the city, under the cutlery tray, a student card lay face down for 14 months. She took it out in September. She is in her 4th year now. She works Tuesdays and Thursdays. She is tired in a way that she likes. Caleb Ostrander asked 1 question at that table in the first week she was back. How do you say his name properly? Kester. Is it Kester or Kester? Ask him. I'm asking you. Thea did not look up from the plate. I know. That's the wrong person to ask, and you know it is. He went out to the gatehouse and asked him. At 11 o'clock at night, there is a tray on the counter in that kitchen. There are 3 cups on it now. 1 goes down to the gate, strong, 2 sugars. 1 stays at the table, and the 3rd one is hers, and she sits down. Now let me ask you something. What would you have done, standing in that doorway, with 10 seconds and no idea what you were looking at? Tell me down in the comments. I read every one. Rest easy now. There will be another one waiting the next time you come this way.